My name is Conor Puckett. I'm the operations manager at Bio-Chem Fluidics, one of the subsidiaries of Halma PLC. So how do we use Augmentir, right? I mean, as a platform, it has a ton of options and capabilities that Russ highlighted, and even more that we just simply don't have time to discuss for sure. But the three main areas where we use Augmentir here at Bio-Chem Fluidics are in the work instruction, training, display, version control process of our documents. The second area of use is really in our continuous improvement opportunity, identification, justification, figuring out where we're going to focus our limited capacity and ability to address these issues. And then the third one, which is the one I'll be speaking about more specifically in this session, is around performance management and how, as an operations leader in the business, I'm able to make larger decisions, and my leadership team is able to make kind of larger business decisions based off the information we get out of Augmentir as well. So taking a step back a little bit, and I'm sure a lot of y'all are probably familiar with the concept of OEE, or overall equipment effectiveness in machine shops. So Bio-Chem Fluidics does have a machine shop environment. We also have our assembly environment, and the assembly environment is where Augmentir is implemented. But in our machine shop environment, we measure our performance of that environment based off of OEE and the three component metrics, which are performance, availability, and quality. And so all of this information is coming straight out of the machines, straight out of the sensors, and tells us basically, is the machine operating as fast and effectively as possible? Is it running during the entire shift? And is it producing components with a quality that we need it to, essentially? And all of that's really easy for us to get, relatively speaking, because it comes directly from our machines. And so when we started to implement Augmentir in the assembly environment, as a leader in our operations environment, I said, we really need to have an apples to apples comparison to say, okay, we've got these two halves of our operating environment, with very different setups. We need to kind of have some form of understanding when either side of that environment is having a good day or a bad day. And so I wanted to try and take this traditional metric of OEE and morph and apply it into the more human side of the assembly environment. Unfortunately, or fortunately, humans are not the same as machines, and human-centric metrics really require human-centric investigations and solutions. So rather than just plugging a device into our machine controller and being able to get all of the ones and zeros that represent what's happening from our machine directly, we needed to make sure that our operators were engaging with Augmentir in a way that the information that they were providing us was relevant to the business decisions that we needed to make as an organization. And then as a managerial staff, myself, our assembly supervisor, it's our responsibility to take the information and the content that Augmentir provides us and the insights that it provides us, and then dig into the why behind our operator's performance. Because it's rarely the fact that an operator is just, who's been with the business, right, anywhere from 5 to 15 years, is just a bad operator. It's typically because of systemic issues in our production environment that this platform allows us to go and investigate. And so morphing that OEE style of investigation into a human-centered environment, you're still focused on these kind of three tenets of performance, availability, and quality, but the philosophy behind it and what you're looking at in your data does in fact change. You're really looking at, are my operators performing to expected cycle times? And if not, why is that? It's typically because of a procedural concern surrounding that, or perhaps it's training of the operator. From an availability perspective, are my operators working at their station for the amount of time in a shift they're meant to be? Well, that could be a variety of different reasons as to why that's not the case, that Augmentir can kind of suggest reasons as to what's going on there. And then from a quality perspective, are we having to do substantial rework there out on the line that's taking our operators out of true production and into fixing something that's happening there at the bench itself? So it's taking this metric-driven KPI, traditionally associated with the ones and zeros coming out of a machine, and adjusting it just enough to be able to apply it in an analogous way into a human-centered environment in your assembly environment. And this allows for a variety of different benefits to the business, right? From my perspective, it gives a 30,000-foot view of performance, and do we need to focus in our machine shop versus the assembly environment as a whole? For my assembly supervisor, you know, it allows him to drive down into the product cells and say, hey, is this particular product line right for a continuous improvement project? Should we go and analyze some of the procedures getting done here, because I noticed that this OEE metric for the, you know, T3 line is too low, or whatever the case might be. And then at an individual level, it gives the management, the assembly supervisor, the ability to tailor improvement plans for individuals, rather than just say, hey, all of you have the same expectations because your job description is the same, figure it out. It really provides a lot more responsibility for both the operator and the assembly supervisor to be able to drive improvements specific to that person, rather than in just broad strokes kind of form. And so this is an example of that 30,000-foot level of information that we get from Augmentir, right? We get this performance, quality, availability data, and we can see how over the course of April of last year through today, we've actually been able to have our OEE equivalent increase over the course of COVID, right? And so we've been able to have these specific changes allow us to continuously monitor what's actually happening out on the production floor. So even amid all the crazy, you know, capacity constraints and people in or out of the operating environment, we're able to continue to drive a level of consistency in one of the most inconsistent production times that we'll probably see in hopefully a long while. Down to the production line area as well, right? Our production supervisor has the ability to go and look at, okay, how are my individual lines performing in a given week? What does the overall assembly environment look like? Well, it looks pretty good, but maybe I need to go and focus on my T3 line and see if that's a problem line that we know we need to have some additional engineering resource go and take a look at that. And as Russ mentioned, you know, all of these visualizations are incredibly easy to set up with the data coming straight out of Augmentir into a visualization platform like Power BI, which this one is using, or, you know, Excel or Tableau or anything else like that. And then again, driving down to the individual level of this human-centered version of OEE, at the end of every month, we have the ability now to essentially give a report card of performance here in our production environment. So the onus is now on the operator themselves to understand, hey, these are the procedures I struggle with this past month. This is my particular slice of efficiency that I'm not seeing. Why do I need to make it better or worse? And so it gives our production supervisor the ability to have this kind of tailored conversation with each individual operator to say, all right, user one, it looks like you've got 38% productivity on this procedure on average for the month. Let's going into the next month, see if we can't pair you with this other operator who's operating at a much higher level, right? So we're understanding where that tribal knowledge exists and then reallocating it in such a way that we have knowledge and skill leaders train up those who are newer to those procedures. And it becomes more about how we can set up an environment for the operator to provide maximal input back to the business. Then it becomes as like a penalization metric for, oh, you didn't meet this, and therefore we're going to, you know, do X, Y, or Z. And so as a whole, between Bio-Chem, Augmentir, and this kind of overall drive to be lean, having these human-centered OEE metrics allow us to really minimize the waste and drive greater value to our customers. And our customers in this case are both those, you know, end users of our product who go on to make larger medical device systems because they can be sure that they're getting it for the most appropriate cost with high quality in the amount of time they expect, if not sooner. But it also helps our internal customers and internal stakeholders, like our production manager, our assembly supervisor, and each of the individual operators as well, know that they are in control of their future in the business and of their own development. And some of the examples, again, specifically here, is we're able to upskill loss leaders. So using these OEE metrics that we're able to get out of the Augmentir system, we can kind of understand, all right, who in our production environment is actually costing the business money if they're working in a particular cell, and intelligently schedule our people around where they are best primed to perform. We can also identify and correct our faulty processes. So where we've had, as the business has scaled, our processes have scaled, sometimes really well, sometimes really poorly. Let's identify and correct those processes so that we're setting ourselves up for success rather than penalizing ourselves when we don't succeed. And then obviously, like I mentioned, the cost savings and quality gains from continuous improvement projects being driven by this information. So as Russ mentioned, the platform does suggest, hey, take a look at these procedures. It looks like you've got a huge amount of variability, or hey, this person is really not performing at this procedure to the level you'd expect. Maybe you should take a look and go investigate with them as well. And so it gives us the ability to start to understand, like, hey, we had no idea this was an issue procedure, and without that kind of background of machine learning and artificial intelligence saying, hey, you might want to go take a look at this, we would have never known to actually turn our focus to this area and find stuff that, oh wow, if we don't address this now, if we tried to scale 10x in the near term, there's no way we'd be able to sustain this growth, right? So the procedural level recommendations, the operator training recommendations really help to understand what we need to focus on, so that in a world like today where we just have such a low amount of capacity, such little capacity and capital to address all of the problems we know exist in our environment, we're able to do this much more specifically and in a targeted fashion that allows us to drive the most gain back to the business that we can in the amount of time and with the amount of resource that we actually have at any given point in time. And so again, if we reflect back to pre-Augmentir time here at Bio-Chem, there's really no way that we would have any insight into this macro view of the organization of our assembly environment without an extended amount of time and effort being dedicated towards making those time studies, and it's simply not something that our business is set up to do.